Um, so if you have questions, I want to make sure that you guys get your questions answered, and um, we'll make sure that we're getting to them. Right, Mark and I. This is one of my favorite topics to talk about because it really helps you conceptually think about learning how to get out of the rat race. I've been buying property now for 20 years. It's been a blessing in my life, in my family's life. Kim and I have really been kind of like collectors of real estate. My biggest regret is I didn't buy enough in the last 10 years. I bought a lot in the first 10 years. And over the last 10 years, I've been worried about how fast the market's moved. And you and I have talked about this.
Yep.
It's been moving like this for a long time, right?
Right.
And so I keep thinking it's going to change, and it just hasn't changed. So interest rates, like at historic lows again.
Yep.
And, and so if you could find some deals, if you can make the numbers work, I can't think of a better way of building wealth. It's been a blessing for us, right? One of the best ways for us. So with that, right, normally this is a time where I would have everybody kind of just jump in and introduce themselves, but do me a favor, in the Q&A or in the chat, just kind of post in there and just say, hey, this is where I'm from. This is what I hope to learn today, right? This is what I'm looking for. We want to make sure that Mark and I are always pouring into you and giving you guys is just a ton of value. And let me tell you, I can't wait till we actually go back to, in our live, setting, because there's just an awesome dynamic. But this has worked pretty well so far over the last 3 to 4 months, and we've helped a lot of people move forward in their life when it comes to buying and selling and investing in real estate. So, Mark, will you take a look at this? It said, Michael says, is now a good time to get into rental real estate considering the eviction bans, rental forgiveness, etc.? I'm concerned about people not paying rent in the short term. So I'm going to hold on to that question, but it's a great question, right? Mark, why don't we start off with some basic intros real fast? Who are you?
Yep.
What do you do, right? And then we'll get started.
Right on. So hopefully we still have access to that Q&A the whole time, and maybe everyone else does too. If everyone else can see what's being asked in the Q&A, that would be helpful too. But we'll figure it out. Anyway, that is a great question, so we'll definitely want to get to that. But in the meantime, I'm Mark Beckett. So Rob and I, we've been doing this, since 2009? Yep. Here kind of in this space. Rob, like you said, usually in person, which hopefully we'll be getting back to really soon, next month, maybe. We'll see if that's good to do. But I've been a real estate investor exclusively for the only source of my income since 2009 or 10, and worked in real estate for most of the last 25 years in one capacity or another. But Rob and I got together in this space, in this room, right? And started doing deals in 2009.
No, Mark joined me. I organized a foreclosure bus tour.
That's right.
In 2008, right?
The bottom of the market.
Bottom of the market.
Everything was terrible. The market was crashing. People were terrified. People were losing houses. We were going through moldy houses that were being foreclosed by the banks left and right, and it was a mess.
Every house was a foreclosure or short sale.
Yep. And
it was such an unbelievable time to buy.
And my God, if we had known then what we knew now, right?
That's right. That's right.
We'd have bought everything we could have got in our hands.
Everything.
Which is a really germane point to make to this discussion tonight, and it does kind of come up as we get to it. But spent most of the last 10 years accumulating the occasional rental property, doing some rehabs. Rob, while you were building one of the largest and strongest realty groups in Northern Virginia, we focused on that rehab stuff on my side of the business. That kind of then morphed into some construction operations that we started to kind of keep ourselves supplied with guys to do work. We started using some of those guys to do some third-party work for our realty clients to get houses ready to sell. And so now for a couple of years, we've been running a construction company that focuses both on our projects, but really as much these days on our clients' homes, getting them ready to sell. So
Yeah, and we'll be real specific, right? Like your niche, like we've kind of narrowed it down, is really getting properties prepped to go live on the open market, right?
Right.
Like what we find is that there's different types of contractors and builders that are out there. I mean, what we've been doing is kind of like this renovate now, pay later program where we're helping people get properties renovated. We're supplying the funds for, basic renovations, paint, carpet, changing hardware, lights, and then we're getting those properties on the market to be sold, right? And
what I've been doing for most of the last decade is trying to spend the least amount of money on a property to sell it for the most amount of money, right? Yeah. That is exactly what any seller wants to do. So we're able to kind of bring those skills to bear to help our realty clients renovate their houses the right way, the most cost-effective, efficient way, and really spend the least to get the most. So we've been able to use those skills for our clients, and it works out real well.
So let's talk about our topic tonight, right? Buy and hold. Oh, and by the way, I'm Rob Chevez, one of the facilitators. Been doing this with Mark, had the pleasure since 2009. I actually started it in 2007. I was solo for a couple years, and then Mark completed me. He completes me, right?
Two-man dream team to talk about last month's topic.
That's right. And and him and I did, he was that smart guy in the room asking really intelligent questions. So make sure you put your questions down on here, right? We believe that the power is in the people all around you, kind of like how you tell your children, like you are who you hang out with. You're the sum of the 5 people you hang out with. It's no different. Like this business is about who you're connected with and who you talk shop with. And so that's one of the joys that we have here. So we're glad to bring this to you. So Mark.
Well, I think a real good place to start is with Michael's question. He asked a really good question. Is now a good time to get into rental real estate and try to find, buy and hold property, considering all the weirdness in the market, and in particular, things like eviction bans, which are in place in most big cities and states that currently would seem like very anti-landlord friendly things, along with the fact that a lot of people are still out of work and the economy is potentially still headed into some headwinds. Is this a good time to be buying property for someone else to try to rent out? So my take on it, the short answer is it's always a good time to have a good rental property, right? Whatever this is, this will pass. I think we've already started to see some good information, some good news start to come out. Any kind of public meeting turns into virus talk before too long, but just a short bit of the virus talk is that it's looking like the virus may mutate into kind of a little bit more like a normal cold and flu kind of thing, where it's super easy to catch, but not nearly as lethal as it has been. That's good. Vaccines are coming. We will get through this. It looks like in the coming months, if not, a year, hopefully much less, things will get a little bit closer back to normal, right?
Yeah. In the meantime, let me give Michael some hard data. So Michael, I'm part of this this association of real estate professionals that has been focused on what's happening with landlords across the country, and I've been talking to a lot of property managers in this market, and I myself have a bunch of rental properties, and I could tell you that 90% of my tenants are paying. Well, I'm going to preface it this way. There's two portfolios that I have. One that's here in Northern Virginia, and 90% of all those people are paying. I talked to the property managers that have hundreds of units, and 95% of their tenants are paying. Yep. I have a little portfolio in Cumberland, Maryland, and there is, my tenants that are Section 8. Obviously, all that's fine, but there are the ones that are not. They're not paying. They're definitely taking,
And real quick, to explain to anybody that doesn't know, when you say Section 8 is fine, that is because that is subsidized rent paid for by the government, right?
That's right.
Once you're in the program, they agree to cover a certain portion, if not all, of your rent. It goes directly to the landlord. Once you're in the program, as long as you maintain your qualification for it, rent always goes out, right?
Yep.
That's why it can be a great program for landlords, because it's practically guaranteed rent as long as your tenant continues to qualify. So we'll kind of get into that in a second about where you want to own property, what kind of neighborhoods, what kind of houses, what kind of tenants. But right now, I agree, in Northern Virginia, we're 100% paid. Haven't heard anything from any tenants expressing any issues. A little surprised. I was actually expecting that we'd at least hear from a couple of folks, but no, everything so far is fine. But I think that's because the bread and butter of the rental portfolio is in kind of bread and butter, early move up kind of neighborhoods, right? These aren't the lowest end neighborhoods, and they're certainly not high end neighborhoods. These are solid middle class, working class neighborhoods that the majority of our rentals are in. And thankfully, most of those folks are fine, right? Their jobs are relatively intact. If you had some kind of issue with the job, it was somewhat temporary. A lot of those jobs are coming back. We are in the DC metro area, which generally does do better than a lot of other places.
Yeah, I mean, if you imagine this, if you're in Orlando or if you're in Las Vegas, it's probably a very different type of conversation. Real estate is local, right? We that's why we're always about setting up local groups with what we do, because real estate is local. I know that Vegas is suffering compared to what we are, compared to us.
Yeah, it would have to be. Anything that's vacation oriented has got to be suffering right now. So I guess the question about timing is, when is a good time to own or buy a rental property? It's when you can find one where the numbers work on the long term, right? And we'll talk about later on what those numbers look like. But a good looking deal that looks like it should work is going to be fine if you buy it now. Will you potentially have an issue in the short term if things get worse and virus gets bad and things shut down and more people get laid off again? Maybe, but I'm seeing that as much as anything as an opportunity, because I don't see this as a years-long issue. This is a months-long issue, and if what comes out of this is some turmoil that results in a motivated seller of a property that we can acquire that makes sense right now on paper as a rental, I'm taking that chance. I'm going to do that. Even if it means suffering through a little bit of weirdness maybe later on this year, if we kind of retrench and things get bad, it is worth it, because it is so difficult to find good performing properties, which we will get into, right? And that's where there's never a good time to own a property that doesn't cash flow and isn't good. And there's never a bad time, I think, to pick up a good rental property. And I'm not particularly concerned with eviction bans and rental forgiveness at the moment, because I think that's going to burn off. Whole separate issue, though, of what happens when the eviction bans that are in place start to burn off. Will there be mass evictions? I don't think so in this area, because like you said, most everyone we know still is performing really well. There will be some parts of the country where it is bad. Is that an opportunity? Maybe, if you know that part of the world.
And as a landlord, we're working with our tenants, right? Like I reduced some of the rents to try to help them through the hardest point. And now people are making up some of those payments. I mean, people want to, it's interesting. People don't want to be displaced, right? Because of what's happening. So they're like, I need to keep my shelter. I need to make sure that this is safe. I need to pay my rent. So
and that comes back to you as a landlord, and this comes up again later in the topic too. But if you have a good property that is well priced and is a place that someone wants to live, they won't want to lose it, right? So you'll find ways to kind of work things out. So a good property, if you're a good landlord, if you're maintaining it right and it's priced properly, will protect you from a lot of downside and a lot of the heartache.
Well, let's go through this. By the way, some of the questions that I hope to answer today, and if you guys want to put some of your questions in the Q&A, please do so, because we've been doing this so long that sometimes we'll gloss over, like, newer people have some basic questions that there's no bad questions, right? But here's some questions that I often get. It's like, how do I find a rental in this market? Like, the numbers are so hard to make work and the demand is so high, right? So We'll talk a little bit about that.
Yep.
We're going to go through how to actually analyze a property and look at the cash flow, right? Making sure that you're buying a good property. We're going to go through some of the criteria that we look for with our rentals. And so as we talk through these things, please, if you have any specific questions, there's no such thing as a dumb question, right? These are all great questions that all of us learn from. So I just want to make sure that we're getting that participation in there.
Yep. And speaking of participation, this is the part where we usually would go around the room, or if we had people on camera, they could kind of turn their cameras on, say hi, introduce themselves. But feel free to do that in the chat, in the Q&A area. Leave your name, leave your email, your phone number, anything you want. If you're looking for something in particular, post it. If you've got a deal, feel free to post it there. You're looking for a contractor or a loan or an agent, whatever it is, post it there in the Q&A or in the webinar chat where everybody can see it. We definitely want to encourage that back and forth. We'll try to keep an eye on it as we can. And if you have a question or things come up, throw it in there and we'll try to address it. But hopefully this will be kind of a back and forth if possible to the best degree that we can, right? So feel free to say, to introduce yourself and say who you are. Legal mumbo jumbo, don't blame us if it all goes pear-shaped. We're not giving you professional advice. We're just telling you what works for us, right? So real quick, as a definition, when we say a buy and hold, what's a buy and hold? As opposed to a rehab property where when we're rehabbing, we're trying to get in and out quick, right? Buy a beat up property, put some money into it, hopefully sell it for more than we've got into it in, no more than 6 to 12 months maximum. Buy and hold means you buy it and you hold it. You rent it out and you're going to hold this property for the long term. Rob, what is your plan for your rental portfolio? When are you going to bail on being a landlord?
I'm not. So, well, what will happen is once all the assets are paid, well, actually, they're almost paid off in like the next 4 or 5 years.
Right.
Then we'll continue being a landlord. We'll acquire some more properties. But at some point when I get really old, like you, right? Mm-hmm. I'm just joking. Mark's not old. When I get really old, I'm just going to own or finance it to like a young kid, at some point that's hungry. And if the numbers make sense, we'll own or finance our assets. So we still control the asset, right? If I have to take that asset back, I already know everything about it, right? Because I've had it for years. We've already owned many of ours for 13, 14 years. So right. And we put, by the way, all of our properties on 15-year notes. Like we wanted to knock them out, right?
When it makes sense and the cash flow allows for it, right?
That's right. When it makes sense and the cash flow allows. That's right.
But rental real estate is, we think, one of the fundamental keys to generational wealth, right? You'll have the option, if you want, to divest of some of the property. You'll have the option of putting it in a trust and giving it to a kid where you can give your kid income for life, not just what the property is actually worth. Yep, that's great too if you're giving them a portfolio that's worth however many millions of dollars. But it's the income. What can your kids do if they start off life with a $50,000, $100,000, $150,000 income, where now they can take chances, right? They're gonna be okay because you have a portfolio of property that you've given them that gives them that kind of base level of income, and now they're free to take big swings in life, and that's what I think really sets families up for generational success.
By the way, guys, I just flashed this book right here. It's a great book. I just got done reading it, right? What Would the Rockefellers Do? It's not on Audible. You actually have to buy it off of Amazon. It's about setting up a family bank, right? And a lot of it revolves around, believe it or not, life insurance, right? And how to replenish the trust accounts using whole life insurance. When I was 27 years old, my mentor at the time, who was in insurance, essentially grabbed him by the neck and said, "You're buying these policies. You're going to thank me, 20 years from now." And they've been accumulating cash this whole time. And he knew I had an interest in real estate. And he said, "Listen, you're going to be able to buy real estate with this at some point, right? And this is your cash. This is your money." And at the time, I didn't really understand. I just knew that I respected him. He told me to do it. And so I did it. And now I look back and I'm like, man, this is awesome. I got a lot of money, right, in those accounts that I can invest in. And I could create a family bank, which I'm doing. I'm in the process of doing. And we'll set up a trust to do it. And real estate will be in that trust. And, our policies will be in that trust. So if you have an interest in building wealth and creating legacy, great little book to read. That's just one step.
Yep. All right. So we've had a couple of good questions pop up, but I believe most all of them get answered while we go through this. So I'm just going to keep motoring on, and we'll keep an eye on the Q&A box. And if something doesn't get answered, we'll come back to it. But so basically, buy and hold, we buy it with the intention of selling it. Never, unless you have a real good reason. That real good reason ought to be to cash out to buy something better, so you can trade up in your portfolio. If you have a better asset, you want to get rid of a lesser performing or less interesting asset and leverage it for something better, that's fine. If you have a need for cash at some point in the future, that's great. If you're like me and you don't have kids, you'll find somebody lucky one day that can have your portfolio, or maybe I'll cash out and go buy an island or something later. But the best thing to do with it is to put it in a trust and give it to your kids. If you have kids and you really want to set them up to be potentially successful and free to do really cool things with the backstop of a portfolio that pays them an income that they can live on, and then do really what they want with their life.
Quick shout out, Mark. I was just thinking about this. I've got a good friend of mine. He's a grid member. He runs a podcast called Rental Income Podcast. His name is Dan Lane, and he's had over 3 million downloads, and all he talks about is this, right? And if you are brand new to the game, it's a great podcast. If you're experienced, it's a great podcast, right? He really breaks it down and interviews specific people like me, specifically about, how we acquired our units. So just a little shout out.
Love it. Retail Income Podcast, right? Rental Income Podcast.
Rentalincomepodcast.com.
Cool. Check that out. All right. So what's the stuff that we need to think about if we're going to start building ourselves a rental property portfolio? The one is, how much money do you have to invest in this thing? Rental property does take cash, right? It's a little different than rehabbing, where you can oftentimes do it entirely with someone else's money. If you've got a good deal, you can find someone else to partner with, loan you 100% of the money. One way or the other, doing deals with no money down is a thing in rehabbing. A little harder to do in buy and hold, where you literally want to own. You want to be on the title. I want this to be my asset. You've got to have some money for that, usually from somewhere, because it's hard to get 100% financing from anyone to buy properties. We'll talk about financing in a second, but you need to know how much cash you've got to invest and know what the numbers are. We'll talk about what the numbers are for owning rental property. So what is that long-term strategy? Are you looking for money now? Do you need money to live on this year? Or are you in a position where you can start building for something that gets bigger over time? That's what a rental portfolio does for you, right? If you need cash now, then you need to be wholesaling and rehabbing or day jobbing or doing something else that puts the food on the table, always trying to save some of that money for item number one so that you have cash to invest in a good rental property when one comes along. But that does need to be part of your strategy.
Yeah. So if anybody is, I would recommend reading Rich Dad, Poor Dad by Robert Kiyosaki. If you haven't read Rich Dad, Poor Dad, read it. It's a great book. The next book after that is Cash Flow Quadrant, what's great about cash flow quadrant, Mark's talking about it right now, right? There's the employee on the left-hand side of the quadrant, the employee, the self-employed person, right? And then on the right side of the quadrant, there's the business owner and there's the investor. And you want to get on the right side of the quadrant as quickly as you possibly can. And know, right, the goal is to be able to, take this earned income that you're making from rehabbing, being an agent or doing, contracting work, and turn it into business income, investment income, right? Passive income. And so those are other great books I recommend you guys reading. Those were some books that led me down the path. Thank you, Mr. Robert Kiyosaki, for that.
Yep. So tolerance for risk is something you need to know. Anytime you own a piece of real estate or your name or something associated with you is involved in the chain of title, there is some certain amount of risk you take there. The good side of rehabbing is hopefully you're mostly done with that risk after you've sold the property to somebody else. But again, you're in the chain of title, so it's never 100% gone. But inherently, we are holding property. We're buying it. We're hoping to own it for years and years. Other people, strangers, are living in it. There are elements of risk there. You need to know how to mitigate that risk, but be comfortable with knowing the risk that you're taking. And then your tolerance for just the hassle. So we call this passive income, but there's no such thing as 100% passive income, right? Someone is watching after your property or your money or your tenants or whatever. So you're going to have people that you're going to have to deal with in this, like anything else. So you're going to have contractors and tenants and agents and property managers and all kinds of people. You have to have a tolerance and a means of dealing with that. There are some people who say, I never want to be a landlord. I never want to have to answer a phone call with a tenant complaining about his leaky toilet or his busted shower or his heat not working or whatever it is. There is usually a solution for that, but you are eventually going to be dealing with someone with some issue at some point. Just try to find ways to mitigate it. And we tell those people, great, I will take that problem off your hands. I will gladly buy your problem property, right? Quick tip. One of the best places to find a good rental property is from an unhappy landlord, right? Current landlords are oftentimes a great source of deal. It's not for everybody, and not everyone manages them properly or treats this as a business, and they will occasionally look to get out, and that's where you'll find yourself a good deal.
Mark, that's a great point. By the way, when you guys buy a property, you have to think of it as a little business. That is a business, right? And you need to make sure that you're going to have every business should have a P&L on that business, right? So that property needs to have a P&L. Rental income in, right? Expenses out, profit would be cash flow. And so just want to make it, I want to make sure that everybody's mindset goes into that. This is a business, right? One of the reasons why I love this business so much is because there's so many pieces that help in wealth creation. So I don't know if we cover this in any of the slides, but I just want to go over them real fast, right? Number one, we can leverage the asset. So you can put 20% down, right? And leverage 100% of the asset, right, Mark? Right? Put 20% down and you can essentially own 100% of the asset. And when appreciation happens, what is that appreciation typically based off of? The amount of money that I put down or the full value of the asset?
And the whole thing goes up.
The whole thing goes up, right? Yeah. So it's leverageable, right? Like that, which is amazing, right? Second thing love about it is who's paying my mortgage?
I write the check, but it's not my money.
Right?
Someone else's money. That's right.
So somebody else, and the thing with tenants is when I'm trying to tell tenants like they should buy a house, because I want to promote home ownership. But I'm like, listen, you're buying a house. Just know that. You're just either buying it for your landlord or you're buying it for yourself, but you're buying a house. right?
Sure.
And so in this case, my tenants are buying a house for me. Man, that's amazing. They're giving me the gift of buying this house for me.
Mm-hmm.
And every time they make a payment, it's they're reducing my my debt on that asset, right? So hopefully if you buy well and you buy in a growth market, the asset value is going up and the debt is being paid down, right? And this is your equity that's kind of building up. Third thing I love about it is all the tax benefits that come from buying and holding an asset, right? I get to depreciate that. So even though I make positive cash flow on an asset, I can depreciate that asset and it then looks like I'm losing money, which reduces my overall taxable income, which is simply amazing, right?
Because the government lets you assume that this building that you own is slowly depreciating, unbuilding itself. It is becoming obsolete year over year. And therefore, eventually, presumably, at some point in the future, it's actually not worth anything because the building will have fallen down. And by then, you need to have written off 100% of it because you're going to have to start over. In reality, it usually doesn't work that way. You'll sell it long before it falls down or rebuild it, or 30, 40, 100 years from now when it finally does fall down, the dirt underneath it will be worth 10 times more than what the building ever was. So it's just a benefit is all it is. It's a tax benefit that you get.
Yeah, it's an amazing benefit, right? And so so anyhow, this is why buying and holding real estate is such a massive wealth creator for people. And people need to understand there's so many beautiful things about it. And so a great book that I also just got done reading is Tax-Free Wealth, right? So if you haven't read Tax-Free Wealth, you can get that one on Audible. And it's a great book on minimizing your taxes to nearly zero. Real estate investors, real estate agents have the ability to write a lot of this stuff off because the government wants to incentivize us to invest in real estate. That's why these things exist, because the government creates incentives for what they want us to do. So I highly recommend reading that book.
Yep. So my big takeaway from this and what you'd said towards the beginning was to treat this like a business, treat each property like its own mini business. So for the reasons that you just said, a lot of people will say, well, I just buy something, buy anything, put somebody in it, and it's going to be fine because it'll go up and I can depreciate it and they'll pay it off. Even if it doesn't make any money now, eventually I'm going to win. And while that may be true, what I would respond to that with is, well, think of this as a business. You could buy any business with your money if you had some money to invest, and somebody has another business for sale that says, well, the business is losing money right now, but it's a great business idea, and eventually it's going to be great. Would you buy a money-losing business today on the hope that it's a great idea and it's going to be better later? Maybe if you had enough money to invest, but probably not.
If I'm a turnaround expert, possibly.
If you're a turnaround expert, maybe. But if you're a first-time investor and you're looking to get started in buy and hold rental real estate investment, probably not the best idea for you to buy a property that you know is going to lose money every month going in the hope that the market will make it right or the payoff will fix it or the tenant will somehow magically get better and want to pay you more money. Just buy good properties to begin with, right? That cash flow now. And we'll look at how that math works. And then as you end up with tons of free cash flow, you can start taking some more risks on some bigger things and try to be a turnaround expert in real estate. But I'd prefer that you just buy a thing that cash flows now. Because if the business works now, it will work in the future. And if it doesn't work now, you got problems. All right, so other things that we need to talk about then. Where do you want to own rental properties? We own rental properties in, as I said, kind of blue collar, working class, decent income areas in major metropolitan areas, predominantly here in the suburbs of Washington, D.C. I like that because that's where most people live. Our quality of tenants are pretty good. We don't buy in the cheapest parts of town. and we don't buy in the most expensive parts of town. But I like owning property near where I live so I can kind of understand the market and understand the area that my tenants are living in, and understand what things are going to impact that market. There are people though, Rob, right, that we know that own rental properties in other parts of the country, and the numbers honestly probably make better sense in other parts of the country. There are parts of the country where you can do better on a cash flow and percent return basis than you can around here, just because our costs are so much higher. Our barrier to entry is much higher to find a good cash flowing investment. But you'll have to determine for yourself what your tolerance is for owning and managing, finding, keeping an eye on, and keeping up with a property that maybe isn't in the town where you live, right? You have that exact experience with out-of-town property.
Yeah, I mean, I own property in Florida. I own property in Maryland. I own property in Virginia. I don't own property in DC. Sorry. Yep. But we have a lot of friends that do, right? Pros and cons. There's pros and cons there.
Let's talk about that for a second, because that gets into where do you own rental properties? Why do you not own property in DC?
You know, honestly, like if I, and this is fear, by the way. This is like, and what I mean by that is like, it's not based on any kind of like real experience, but there are so many landlords that I met along the way that essentially were like, oh my God, my DC properties, they're the worst. I'm, trying to get a tenant out in DC is impossible. So there's all this like negative speak about it that I was like, oh, well, it looks like I'm not going to go to DC. I'm fine in Virginia. It's, I live in Virginia, so I'm fine with Virginia, right? So it's very pro-tenant, but that's not to say there's lots of investors that have rental properties in DC that like kill it because they know DC, right? So I don't want to discourage anybody from that. I saw there was a question, how do you find, 4 to 8 units in DC? You would do it the same way that you find, units anywhere, right? Which is building your network, attending different investment groups, going after absentee landlords, right? And going into the tax records and finding out who are the owners of the 4 to 8 unit properties, and then sending them letters, right? And then just keep in mind, 4 units, that's still residential financing, by the way. As soon as you go over 4 units, it's now commercial financing. And by the way, you can see, especially this whole COVID thing, like opened my eyes on how government-backed residential 1 to 4 units were treated in comparison to commercial properties, right? It was like you had the golden ticket if you owned 1 to 4 units that were, Fannie, Freddie owned. Mm-hmm. And if you were over 5 units, they were like, no, you're pretty much shit out of luck,
Yep.
So.
So where you should own a rental property has a lot to do with your understanding of that market. How strong of a market is it? What are the forces that will impact the economy in that market? What are the landlord-tenant laws that will affect your convenience or inconvenience potentially for owning that property? It's what research you are willing to do to understand that market. All I can tell you is you're probably better off starting near an area that you're already familiar with, maybe near where you live. You can get familiar with anything, but probably the worst thing you can do is just buy property in Ohio because you heard it was cheaper, and it probably it's got to work because it's cheaper, right? Maybe not, right? So
I've seen a lot of people get burned that way.
Where you invest has a lot to do with what kind of work you're willing to do. How long you intend to keep it, we talked about that. These need to be long-term investments, right? Buying something as a rental property, knowing you're going to sell it next year probably is not a recipe for making a lot of money. How will you manage your properties? How do you manage the first few properties? Pretty easy. It's not that difficult to manage a few properties on your own. You can take the phone calls. You can deal with the few repairs and tenant turnovers and things like that for your first few properties. But what are you going to do when you get to a dozen? That then becomes a full-time job to keep a dozen rental properties in good shape, the rents collected, the bad tenants moved out, the vacant units marketed and new tenants moved in, the leases negotiated, the agents paid that brought you your tenants. Property management is a skill. It has a value. We'll talk about its cost, but its value is in your time. And if you don't want to become a professional property manager, then you need to plan for what you're going to do once you get past a couple of properties that will not be easy to manage on your own unless you make that a good bit of your day. So something to think about. And then rate of return on other investments. We'll talk a little bit about the rate of return on real estate. Robbie talked a little bit about the other ways you make money besides just the cash flow, between loan pay down, price appreciation, but compare that to the other things that you invest in. And then that helps you decide when you're looking at a potential investment property. All right, I could put this money into Tesla stock and make 15% a year on that, or I could put it in this rental property and what's that going to pay me? Always look at your investments as a part of a larger portfolio. Understand what the rest of your portfolio does for you, and is this new thing going to be better than what else you could invest in? And then the other bit is appreciation. What rate of appreciation do you expect from real estate? That just kind of gets down to your crystal ball, right? But I can tell you, historically in the United States, we can expect somewhere between 6 and 8% on average over decades of
that would be really that's really high. Actually, it's like 4.5%.
All real estate is local, right? It depends on where you are, but I think the average in the United States of America across 50 states is somewhere between 6 and 8%, but it depends on your time horizon. What time are you talking about? Over the last 5 years, the last 50 years, or the last 250 years? So all of that is kind of relative. What we can tell you, though, is in most everywhere, I can't think of anywhere in the country outside of a hazardous material zone that hasn't appreciated in value over the last 50 years. So if you look at real estate as a generational investment, appreciation will usually be a wind at your back over the long term. But knowing appreciation and what your potential appreciation curve looks like will impact where you buy, when you buy, what you buy. I can tell you right now, buying into the DC metro area, expecting 10, 15% annual appreciation for the next 10 years is maybe not a great bet.
Yeah, Mark, and I just want to make sure that we're talking accurate numbers. It is. I'm just Googled it as well. Yep. It's not over 5. It's like 4%. It's like 4 and change, right? Historically in the U.S., if it was 8%, it'd be amazing, right? But since it's been tracked, right, somewhere around 4.5%, right? I'm looking on here and it says somewhere between 3 to 5, right? So just know. But then what you got to do is you got to add in, the tax benefits associated with that, right? You're adding in other things, the leverage. Maybe you were able to get that asset at 10 to 15% below market value. This is just talking about, historical appreciation over time,
which doesn't really refer to and doesn't impact the return on your investment. That is different. We'll talk about that in a second. The return on your equity in a property is entirely different than just the rate of appreciation from year to year. One of the great things about rental real estate. So we'll end up talking about that. Okay, so like I was saying, we personally prefer kind of lower middle market properties in kind of solid working class neighborhoods. My personal opinion is that very low end properties tended to attract tenants that will cause you more trouble over the long term and will require more maintenance. And my opinion on high end properties is that it is just nearly impossible to find $1 million property that you can buy at a price that makes any sense whatsoever for rental. There's a floor on rental value in most cities, and there's a ceiling on rental value in most cities. You want to try to be a little bit closer to the floor than the ceiling in your market in most places. But if the ceiling is $4,000, $5,000, $6,000 a month, that you'll see people pay for a $1.2, $1.3 million house, right? And look up rental properties here in the DC area, in Arlington. If you were to rent a single family house in Arlington, people will pay $4,000, $5,000, $6,000 a month, but the cost to own it is going to be higher than that if you buy that house that will rent for $4,000 or $5,000 a month, unless you happen to have bought it 30, 40 years ago. It is really difficult to buy high-end property that makes sense as a rental. And then again, not knocking any particular kind of investment, but maybe Rob, you can speak again to your experience in a smaller market with lower rents in an area that doesn't have as good of an economy and as strong of a labor market. Lower end areas with fewer opportunities and weaker economies do not tend to make for good rental.
Yeah, they're tough. What I would want to let everybody know is, if you look at the data of how many households are forming in a particular area, how many people are coming into an area, and you can determine that that area is growing, that's a great place to invest, right? Yeah. Many of these smaller markets, you'll find that they either kind of hold steady, or they're every year they're dying just a little bit. And those are markets you want to stay away from, right? I always wondered why people would just abandon houses and board them up, right? And you'd be like, oh my God, like, why are they just leaving that property to die, essentially, right? You go to some of these markets and I would find that. And then, I realized it's because the value of that asset has not changed in 20 years, right? And yet the asset requires ongoing maintenance, and then there's tenant turnover. And so eventually the landlord could just say, you know what, it's not worth it, right? I've got this duplex I bought, I can speak from experience, right? I bought a duplex 15 years ago for $50,000, right? It's probably worth today $40,000, right? But yet it's still going to need a new roof at some point. I keep patching it, right? I've changed HVAC. I mean, so while on paper, some of these markets look great, they just don't work out that way, right? That one benefit piece of that 4% appreciation, right, compounded over time, year over year, doesn't happen in those markets.
And
right?
That's obviously not a strong market, not a strong job market, not a strong general economy. So what has that translated into for you from a tenant experience? What are your tenants like?
Well, even in those, believe it or not, even in those markets, you can find good tenants, but they're going to be a little bit higher end they won't be the mid-market properties. They'll be a little bit more higher end, right? I bought, unfortunately, in the lower end in a dying town, and the tenant pool isn't great, right? And that's where you get killed as a landlord, is with tenant turnover. And you want to minimize tenant turnover as much as possible. With our Herndon portfolio that we've owned for 15 years, I think I've had 3 tenants leave in 15 years out of the 9 that we have. Yep. So that's great. We take care of them.
That's what you're after.
That's what you're after.
Cheap is not necessarily good, right?
No,
okay.
It's not. Not.
Okay. Yeah. So this isn't about making value judgments about people. Everyone needs a house, and it's great if part of what you're doing as a landlord is giving someone a home. But the experience is that just because a house is cheap and if the neighborhood is not doing well, it may not.
Chris has got a great question here.
Yeah.
And he said, as you look at appreciation, do you factor that into the purchase when evaluating a deal, or do you look at cash flow, i.e. is appreciation important or the cherry on top? Right?
Answer that question specifically. So let's keep motoring on and we'll get to it. All right. So that was the kind of properties that we're looking for in the kind of neighborhoods that we like to buy. What kind of condition are these things in? Right, you're a renowned slumlord, right?
No.
We're not slumlords, but we're also not trying to create the Taj Mahal of rental properties either. We fix what's broken. Most of the houses that we buy for rental need a little bit of something. You can sometimes get lucky and find that motivated landlord that just wants to get rid of a place that's rent ready, but it usually needs a little bit of something. But that little bit of something is fixing the broken stuff. We are painting cabinets before we're gut renovating kitchens. We're going to reuse the appliances if they can be cleaned. If not, we're going with white appliances, used appliances. We're trying to have a good, clean, livable, well-priced, great condition for its price and neighborhood property that doesn't have any problems and doesn't have anything broken, but we're not necessarily doing gut renovations on any of these things either, unless they need it anyway. If the place is just completely destroyed and you've got to replace all of the cabinets, you have to just renovate the kitchen because it is shot. When we're fully renovating the kitchen, then typically we'll do a little bit nicer, not the cheapest laminate floor. We'll do a tile floor, maybe even an inexpensive granite countertop. One, because the material does hold up reasonably well. And also, if you can make your place a little bit nicer, or even best case scenario, the nicest unit in that complex, in that community, in that neighborhood for the same money as everybody else, who do you think is going to have the happiest, most longest lasting tenants? So when you have to renovate, don't completely cheap out on things. Try to just kind of keep them patched up and running when you can. But when it does come time to renovate, consider whether or not maybe splurging a little bit on some nicer finishes won't get you a better quality experience as a landlord, meaning more people want to rent it, meaning you'll have a better tenant pool to choose from. You'll be able to at least get full market rent, if not maybe slightly above, or if you're willing to go slightly below, you will have much less turnover if you've got one of the better looking houses in the neighborhood.
Yeah, yeah, that's a pro tip.
Band-aids until you need it, but when you need it, renovate not the cheapest way that you possibly can, maybe slightly better than the cheapest way, but still nothing super custom or fancy like we do for our renovations. So our rentals is a grade of renovation far lower than it is when we're rehabbing for sale. All right, property management. So who is a property manager? What do they do for you? What do they cost? 8 to 10%, right, of the gross rent. Average property manager is going to want to also charge you anywhere from 1/2 to a full month's rent at turnover. I think a good one is 1 month, right? A good property manager is going to look to be paid the equivalent of 1 month's rent if they have to find you a tenant, meet them, sign them up, collect their rent, right? On top of 8 to 10% a month.
Correct.
Right? So that's what it's going to cost you. And what you get for that is the property manager handling your marketing, the credit and background checks, which are crucial, rent collection, repairs, evictions. And for me, the most important part of this is they're doing all of that as a business for my business. So I don't have to be a bad guy, not the bad guy, but just a bad guy. I'm probably not going to be a bad guy anyway, but I know me. I probably would if push came to shove. Like, yeah, it's bad. All right, yeah, get back to me when you can. We'll take care of it. I'll help you out this month. Just make sure you pay me the next month or whatever. I'm probably not the world's greatest rent collector and leg breaker in the world, but my property manager never fails to collect the rent because they have no emotional attachment to it. I'm paying them for a job. Their job is to collect my rent. They know the only way they get their money is if they collect my rent. And so their conversations with tenants are very simple. Here's the deal. The money is due on the 1st. If we don't have it by the 5th, you'll get the notice that you've got to pay or quit. Pay or quit means quit or get out. If we don't have money within X number of days after that, we will move into an eviction process and you'll have to move out. It's not because anybody's a bad guy. It's just because that's my job. My job is collecting the rent. I have a client. They expect the rent to be paid, and those are the rules, and that's the way it goes. And one of the best things a property manager does for you is force you to treat it like a business and not fall back on your own personal ability to do the right thing for yourself, manage your property like a business and treat it properly. So what I like to tell people is Run these like businesses. Always collect your rents. Don't accept excuses or partial payments. Have your property manager do the right thing, and that hopefully makes you good money, and then you can do good things with your money. If what you want to do is support affordable housing, great. Make enough money that you can go out, buy more rental property that you can rent below market value. You'll get tons of applications. You'll be able to choose the applicant that you think you're going to be helping the best, but you can only do that if you're making money, if this property is working for you and you can afford to keep it and you can pay your mortgage. The only way you can do that is if the tenants are paying their rent. That's why I use a property manager.
So Keith asked a great question. I remember asking myself the same question early on in my career. And he says, do the property managers essentially pay for the work, or do they take care of it and then pass the cost on to the landlord, right? And so it is the property manager will coordinate the work, and then of course they're going to bill you for that work that was completed, right? So the owner pays for that work. I remember thinking the same thing that Keith did. I believe that that's his question, because I was like, wow, 8 to 10%, that's a lot. Like, are they going to cover the expenses, right? No, they do not cover the expenses, right? They essentially coordinate all the work, and then you get billed for that work. They take it out of your rent, by the way. It's not that they really bill you, is that they take it out of the rent when they collect the rent.
Correct.
Unless there's not enough there, at which point they will bill you.
Correct. Yeah. So the way I'd have it work is when something needs to be done, property manager checks in, says, hey, got a notice from the tenant, this thing is broken. How do you want to handle it? I can send a guy out to fix it. Almost always it's send the guy out to tell us what it is. How much is it? Here's how much it'll cost. It's going to be $600 to fix the thing. The rent's $1,000. So we'll pay for the $600. And this month after the rent comes in, instead of your $1,000, you're going to get $400 because we're going to take the $600 out to pay me back for this repair that I managed for you. Typically don't charge extra for that work, right? That's part of what they're getting their 8 to 10% for managing all of that. But this gets to the point of you still have to manage your property manager, right? You can't just kind of sit back and expect someone else to always do the best job of managing your money. They're spending your money on these repairs. So I would never just toss a property manager the keys and say, take care of it. Send me the net of whatever's left and just make sure it's in good shape. Always demand if a repair needs to be done that you be notified, preferably that your property manager is helping coordinate 1 or 2 estimates for a repair or a replacement of something, so that you know that you're paying at least remotely close to market value for your repairs when they happen. And then you should be getting detailed reports showing here's what had to get done this month. Here's what your net rent was. At the end of the year, you get a detailed report on the property management expenses, the repair expenses, all of the things that you need to turn over to your tax guy so they can appropriately credit you for those things. For the costs of your ownership. That should come out of your income on the year of ownership. Property managers should take care of all of those things for you. That's what they're getting the 8 to 10% for. The 1 month's turnover is for all the extra stuff that they do at turnover time. Got to market the property, have to meet prospective tenants in the property and show them, take their applications, and then most importantly, running those credit or background checks. Always, always, always do credit and background checks, right? If you don't be surprised if you end up in eviction court much sooner than somebody else. Have credit standards, have a good property, well priced so that you have multiple applications to choose from, so that you can choose the one with good credit. You can choose the one that passes a good background check. You can choose the one where your property manager was able to hopefully get a hold of a landlord that you got a truthful story from. That, yeah, they lived here and they moved away for whatever reason, but it was fine. Know that landlord verifications will vary in quality, right? Sometimes if you've got a terrible tenant, the landlord, oh, they're great. Please take them. Let them move into your house and move out of mine. But we find most landlords actually, when you get a hold of them, are reasonable about giving you honest answers if they can give you an answer at all. Some of them will just say, yeah, privacy. I don't tell anything about anybody. I can verify that they lived here and that's all you get. But you need to check anyway. Right?
Let me tell you where rookie landlords make mistakes. When it comes to this, they get desperate. the property's on the market, and they start freaking out. Oh my God, I need a tenant. I need a tenant. And what happens is they get some applications in, and they're less than perfect. They're not that great. But because this fear is there that the property is going to go unrented, they essentially don't trust the spidey senses that are telling them, hey, this is not a great person to put in potentially.
Mm-hmm.
But you know what? They're going to pay me like 2 months rent up front, and like there's something there, like, and I don't want it to go another month with it being vacant, and so I'm just going to accept this person. And then it goes south because you didn't wait for that right tenant. Now, sometimes, by the way, bad credit is not an indication of, like, you have to understand the whole situation. Maybe somebody went through a divorce. Maybe somebody had like a major medical illness. There's reasons why that credit might be bad. You'll have to look at the entire report, make a judgment on it. But be patient, I guess, is the whole point. Know that, somebody that might be a little bit better could come along, and don't be fast to just accept somebody because your property has been vacant for 2 or 3 weeks. Let me tell you, the best thing that you could do, this is a pro tip, is just lower the rent just a little bit, $50, right? And you're going to get a whole new wave of people, and probably better people, right? It's always price in relation to what you get. So if your rent, there's another reason why you never want to go like above market rents. If your rent is above market average, a savvy renter knows, right, that, hey, they can go get the same house somewhere else, right, for a better price.
And they will. And the tenant will move to save $50 a month, right?
They will. But somebody that's a little desperate to get into a property that they've been rejected, they will apply to that higher rental property, right? So now what you've done is you've attracted a lesser quality tenant, right? And you've rejected, some of the other better quality tenants just by being overpriced on the rental rates, right? So it's just a little bit of a pro tip when you start looking at that. Yep. Okay. What else we got here, Beckett?
Yep. Always do your background checks, and the property managers can get credit and background and legal background, and check all of those things and look for the good guys. So let's talk about how you buy property now. So what are the loan considerations and the economic considerations for wanting to buy a rental property? On average, in the average market with the average lender, if you were going to go out and get a loan, you are looking at having to come up with 25% of either the purchase price or appraised value of the property that you're buying, usually the lesser of the two, right? If it appraises for more than what you're buying it for, you're still only going to get 75% loan to value from the average bank on a conforming loan on your purchase price.
But Mark, I heard I can go out and get a property with like for 3% down, right? Or 5% down.
You sure can, if it's going to be the roof over your head. If it's going to be the roof over someone else's head, the bank is taking more risk, right? Because it's not you that's going to lose your house if the mortgage doesn't get paid. It's your tenant. Banks understand this. They know they're taking more risk, so they're going to try to pass that risk onto you. They'll do this 2 ways, by requiring more equity, and the other way is by pricing the loan higher. But the other thing you could say is, I can go out and I get a 3% down loan at like 4% right now. Yes, you can, if it's the roof over your head. But that same loan for your rental property, expect to pay 4.75%, 5%, and still require 25% down, because the bank is going to try to mitigate that risk, and they will not give you the same leverage. And
by the way, this is why I'm such a fan for new people looking to do buy and holds, especially, I want to say younger people, but people that are okay with living with other people, right? House hacking, baby, right?
Hack that house.
You hack that house, meaning you're able to buy that asset as a place where you're going to live.
Owner occupied.
It's going to be an owner-occupied property, and you're going to rent out a basement or a bedroom, and you're going to get other people to pay for that. And we've done some sessions on that, but that's such a great way, because you get a lower interest rate, put less money down, And that property eventually will become your first investment property. It should become your first investment property. You move out, you buy another one, you can do it again, right? And so look into house hacking, or
But if you're
send
going
me
to
a
get,
message about
if
it.
you're going to get a loan, the best loan, the cheapest loan with the most leverage is going to be usually a conforming loan. That means a Fannie or Freddie backed loan product, right? It can still be a conventional loan, but it's one that conforms to the Fannie and Freddie guidelines so that whoever lent you the money can sell it on the mortgage-backed securities market, do the regular big lender thing. And you can still, I believe, most people in most cities qualify for up to 10 of those, right? 10 times you can get a conforming loan with 30-year amortization and the minimum amount down and the lowest rates for interest. After 10, most people cap out and they'll say, all right, you can't have any more of these government-backed super cheap loans. You got to find some other way to finance your investment property.
Guess what? If you're single, you can get married. And then what? You can
10 more, baby.
10 more. 10 more,
10
right?
per signature.
10 in one name, 10 in the other name.
Right. 10, it's 10 per signature. So you can do that. You can partner with family members. If they don't have 10 properties under their name, you can find other ways to get other people on a conventional loan, a conforming loan, so that it gets you the best terms. But eventually that asset class does run out. But by the time you have 10 properties under your belt, you probably will then qualify for some kind of commercial financing. You can take money out of the other properties, or you can get a commercial loan on a revolver with still 25-year amortization, even though it may be a 5-year loan. The amortization is run at 25 years so that you still have the low monthly payment that hopefully your mortgage covers. We'll talk about the exotic stuff another time, but for most people, know that your first 10 can typically be financed with a traditional bank loan using conforming loan types that will get you that cheapest money with the longest term rate. But those loans, almost universally, in fact, somebody feel free to jump in if they know of anyone that's got a cheap conforming loan that you can take out in something other than your personal name. These typically do not work for LLCs, trusts, anything other than individuals. Fannie and Freddie do not purchase, to my knowledge, loans owned by limited liability companies. So what does that mean? Without getting too deep into the benefits, positives and negatives of an LLC, a limited liability company is an entity that you establish that basically has its own, it is an entity. It becomes its own thing. It has its own life in a way, and it stands between you and the rest of the world as far as what has happened surrounding that entity. So if an entity owns a house and someone gets mad, trips, falls, hurt, whatever, wants to sue the person that owns it, great. The owner is an LLC. The owner is this entity. The owner is not me. Can't sue me, can't come after me. You can have whatever this entity has and whatever it's worth, but once it's tapped out, that's it. That's all that you get. And that has obvious benefits in any business scenario, anything you do where you interact with the public. There's definitely a lot of benefit to having the limit of liability of an LLC. However, you cannot just walk into Wells Fargo and say, hey, I want to buy this townhouse down the street and rent it out. I want to put it in the name of 123 Main LLC. Give me some money so I can buy it. They will say, nope, you have to buy it in your personal name. So what people then do sometimes is they'll say, great, I'll buy it in my personal name. I'll get it rented out. Lender's happy, tenant's happy, cool. I'm now going to go back to the title company and say, hey, file a quitclaim deed in the name of the LLC, and I am going to deed my ownership into the LLC so that the deed is now being held by the LLC. I don't own it anymore. This LLC owns the property. Can you physically do it? Yes. Will it work? Possibly. Is it legal? I think probably.
Yes.
But is it in violation of your original loan document with your lender?
Yes.
Almost every time. Almost certainly. In fact, I'll just go ahead and say certainly. Any loan you're taking out today that's a conventional conforming loan will have in it what's called a due on sale clause that says you cannot sell, transfer, dispose, otherwise move this property into anyone else's name without telling us as the lender and getting our approval for it. And by the way, they'll not approve it. They don't just say, oh, sure, put it in the name of your LLC, we're fine. Because why? They're looking out for their risk. You're trying to minimize your risk. You minimizing your risk is maximizing your lender's risk. They do not want you just putting property in the name of an LLC. If they know about it or if they find out about it, it could be a problem. And what happens is they'll call the due on sale clause. They'll say, hey, we looked up in the land records here that this property is now owned by an LLC. Or we sent a notice and it got bounced back and says this forwarding address is now the name of some LLC, or we were checking on your insurance that you pay for through your mortgage and the insurance is now owned in the name of an LLC. Looks to us like maybe you transferred this property. If this is no longer owned in your name, you now have 90 days to pay us off. That is possible. Now, the next bit, Rob's shaking your head. Have you ever had it happen?
No.
You ever heard of anybody that had it happen?
No.
Me neither, but technically,
you're right.
It can happen, right?
That's right.
The reality is,
if you pay,
I've not heard it.
Yeah, I mean the reality is, Mark's 100% right. The reality is, as long as that mortgage is being paid, the banks don't care, right?
So remember that third slide that we're not attorneys and
that's right.
We're not giving you legal advice.
Yep.
But we can tell you in experience, if
all
a
of my
property is
entities
transferred
have been
into
transferred.
an LLC, it does provide you the benefit of protection that the property is now technically owned by the LLC, and most lenders aren't looking for that. They're not asking for documents to prove that. And if it does come up, I have heard that some landlords can say, oh, yeah, that's my property manager. I still own it. The property manager is collecting things and paying for insurance. That's why the name changed. Don't worry about it. The mortgage is still being paid. And it can just go away. But just know that to own a property in your LLC, to maximize your liability protection, you are probably not going to be able to just do that on day one with the cheap money, conventional conforming loans that you're going to get at a bank. You can do it with commercial loans. You can do it with a line of credit. You can do it with money that you take out of another property, but you typically can't do it on the initial purchase of a property if you want to use the conforming least expensive loans from the banks. Other ways to get around that is probably a topic for another night. Yep. How you can use trusts and other ways to kind of get around liability issues while also being able to get access to cheap money.
We'll do that another night.
We'll do that another night. For most people, you have less than 10 properties. Don't worry about it. Put it in your name. Get as much insurance as you can possibly carry. Get the best landlord policy you can get for your average rental townhouse in a regular city. It's still going to be only hundreds of dollars a month, if that. Get an umbrella policy on top of that. You should have a good insurance guy if you're going to be messing around in real estate anyway. Make sure you're insured 8 ways to Sunday, every way you possibly can. And then we'll get into the exotic stuff on a different night. So the other money you're going to need to have is a 6-month reserve, right? We're borrowing regular bank money. Banks want to see you have 6 months of ability to pay them in case your tenant moves out and doesn't pay you. So just know that that's going to get factored into the money that you've got to have. And if you go to refinance to take advantage of today's low rates and you go back to your same bank, they'll probably only give you a 70% max LTV on a refinance. But that's okay, because if you're refinancing and the property has gone up in value, you will still be able to take more money out than you probably were before. And in a best case scenario, and we've done this before, buy the house that we're getting a great price. We found a motivated seller. We're buying the house for $100,000 and it's worth $150,000. Bank is only going to lend me 75% of that $100,000 purchase price, not what it appraises for today. Fine. Take my $75,000 from the bank, have to put my $25,000 in to buy the house. 6 months after your tenant has moved in, it's called seasoning. They want to see your rental property seasoned and that a tenant actually is paying the rent, you're paying the mortgage, everything is working out. You can go back and say, hey, I would like to refi and recast my mortgage. Take another look, reappraise this thing. Go out and reappraise it now with the 150 or maybe more. If you fix the property up, maybe the value now is 160, 165, and you can borrow 70 to 75% of that. That may well be as much or more than you actually have in the property total. So when you buy a property at a really good price, you can refinance it oftentimes and get all of your money back, and sometimes then some. That is a good rental property deal. When you can own this thing with none of your own money, 100% of the bank's money, and the tenant's rent is still paying all of that mortgage, plus enough for the insurance, plus enough for the HOA, plus enough to even pay you a couple bucks a month, that's a good rental property. That's what you're looking for, right? That's kind of the sweet spot.
A lot of people call that the BRRRR method, right? So if you listen to Bigger Pockets, you got David Green on there. They've got the BRRRR method, which is buy, renovate, refinance, repeat, right?
Rent. Buy, renovate, rent.
Yeah.
Refinance.
Rent, repeat.
Repeat.
Yeah.
Get your money out, get 100% or more financing and leverage, take that money and then put it into another property.
Now we did that, years ago before anybody was coming up and talking about the BRRRR method, but it was like, that was the best way to do it, right?
Yep.
Try to get all of our money back out, right? Get new debt put onto it and then do it again.
Correct. And your strategy may be to take more than the money out that you have into it. And if it appraises for that, you can do that. So you can have $100,000 into the house and take a loan out for 125. I suggest you do something good with that extra 25, right? Don't just go out and buy a Maserati with it. Go out and buy another rental property with it. So don't use leverage irresponsibly. But if you can make maximum use of that leverage and make more money on it than it's costing you, that's a real good way to get rich. All right, so that's a loan consideration. So people are always asking, well, is this a good deal? Like, should I buy this thing? Would you buy this thing? People are asking us to look at their deals and tell them if they make sense. So I just figured I'd make one up and we just kind of run the numbers on it real quick and see if this kind of thing makes some sense. So my sample rental deal here is a townhouse in this area. I think these numbers are kind of valid for our area. It's a townhouse that I can buy for $250,000. It needs $10,000 in work, which is a lot. We typically don't spend 10 grand going in on day one, but we're getting a deal. $25,000 townhouse that's in a little rough shape, needs paint and carpet and some stuff fixed and maybe a new refrigerator and maybe a window or two, right? A reasonable amount of work. And it's going to rent for $1,750 a month. It's a townhouse, so we know it's in an HOA community and the homeowner association costs $75 a month. First thing I can tell you is a house that rents in this area for $1,750 a month is probably selling retail for more than $250, right, Rob? Would you?
Yeah, probably around 300.
Probably a house today that's going to rent for $1,750 is probably worth 300 or more in today's market. So right now, I can tell you already, you've got to be getting a deal on this house. You can't just go out, and look on Zillow and find a townhouse in the neighborhood that you can rent for $1,750 that you're going to pay $250,000 for today. You're going to need to find that motivated landlord. You're going to need to find that pre-foreclosure deal. You're going to need to find that estate property. You're going to need to do something to find a deal. But let's say that you did. You got one. The house is worth $300. You're going to get it for $250. Great. I'm 50 grand under the market already on day one. My tenant's going to pay all the utilities. The landlord's going to pay the real estate taxes, right? Real estate taxes on a $250,000 to $300,000 house is about $4 grand a year in this area. Your market may vary, but you need to know. But for my assumption purposes, $4 grand a year and $1,200 a year in your landlord insurance, right? $100 a month for a good landlord policy that covers the house. The tenants always need to get tenant insurance to cover their contents and their liability and anybody that they invite in. But you get a landlord policy from most carriers, about $100 a month for a house of this value. So does this thing make any sense? Is this a good rental deal? Let's take a quick peek at what this thing is going to cost us. So your 75% down loan, if you use maximum leverage, and let's say you're doing this today, you can probably get a 30-year mortgage. You'll probably pay about 5% today if you have decent credit, right? So let's just assume that you can qualify for that. Let's assume that you're going to have some costs in owning this property. If your tenant leaves and you have to find a new tenant, you're going to be out some amount of time. It is highly unlikely that one guy's going to move out, the other guy's going to move in the same day, and you not have to lose anything. You're probably going to spend a couple of days finding a new guy, a couple of days painting the place, swapping out the carpet, whatever it is. I'm going to assume $1,000 a year in those rental costs. $1,000 a year in repairs. Maybe you get lucky and you don't have any repairs. Maybe you're a slumlord and you choose not to make any repairs and your tenant's okay with it. Eventually, repairs will come for you, right, Rob? I manage your houses. I repair your houses. You can ignore them for a few years, but eventually you'll need to fix some stuff. So on average, you should account for having some budget for repairs. And by the way, on a turnover year, if your tenant leaves, you're probably going to have more repairs because now you're going to have to paint the whole place. You're going to have to replace the carpet. You're going to have to fix that big gappy front door that's been letting cold air in all winter long that you've been ignoring for the last 3 tenants. Eventually, you're going to have to fix some stuff. So turnover repairs are always higher usually than just your annual kind of maintenance when stuff breaks off.
Did we fix that squirrel problem?
Started to. I'll show you the photo of the hole you got in the top. That damn thing ate through the top of your shingle down into the roof. So squirrels will chew through your house. You can get a insurance plan, right? You can buy the warranty, the home warranty deals that will cover your HVACs and your appliances and maybe the occasional leak and that kind of thing. But a good warranty policy costs what? $500 a year? $600 a year? So that still has a cost. So you can choose to pay for the repairs yourself. You can try to get it covered under a warranty. Either way, I would suggest you do.
Yeah, but they only cover the mechanicals.
Right? They don't cover squirrels eating into your attic. And then letting the bees in that then have to be chased out and all the other stuff you're going to find that you have to deal with when you're a landlord. So account for those things. I'm going to say $1,000 a year in rent when you go to turn it over until you get the new guy moved in. $1,000 a year in miscellaneous repairs when the refrigerator breaks. So back to somebody's earlier point. Well, what about the depreciation that you get on your taxes? What about the fact that they're paying down your loan and now the house is worth more than what you owe on it? What about the fact that in a good market, the value is going up on this house? Great. All of that stuff is true. All of those things will make you wealthy over time, but they add absolutely $0 to your monthly kitty. They do nothing to help you pay your mortgage, nothing to help you keep your tenant in a house. So while all those things are factors, they don't count towards monthly net profit or monthly net income, right? So I don't consider them when I'm looking at something, what I'm going to consider to be a good rental property. If I'm going to buy it, it needs to work without all that stuff. So to the person's point earlier, like cherry on top was the phrase that is used. That's what I consider it. I consider depreciation, price appreciation, loan payoff, all of that stuff, that's gravy. That gravy can amount to 5, 6, 8% additional value to you a year, but it doesn't affect my cash flow. I want cash flow. So I don't look at that for the purposes of running numbers. So now let's take a look at what the numbers would be. You're going to need about $70,000 to buy this $250,000 townhouse between your down payment and your 6 months worth of reserves. Trust me, you can plug all this into a calculator on the internet and prove all these numbers, but it's roughly this. It's roughly $70,000. Your monthly costs then are going to be roughly $1,000 a month for that 5% mortgage, about $400 a month in taxes, about $100 a month in your landlord insurance, $75 a month for the HOA, for the total of $1,575 a month in costs. That's what it's going to cost you to own this $250,000 house. That's $18,900 a year in cost. If you manage it, right? Let's say I want to get a property manager to manage all this for me. His 8% is going to add another $126 a month, $1,500 a year, $20,400 a year is what it's going to cost you to own this property if you have professional property management. So how much are we making? $1,750 a month, 21 grand a year, but we're going to lose $2,000 a year in fixing stuff as it breaks. No rent if the tenant leaves and I got to find a new guy, and it takes me a couple of weeks to get the new person moved in. So my 21,000 is really 19,000 in rent that I can count on in an average year. So that equals a net loss of over $1,000 a year if you're using a property manager. But wait, you say, I'm going to buy a house in great condition. I'm not going to worry about repairs. That's fine. I'm a great landlord. $1,750 is actually an aggressive price. Tenants are never going to leave. I don't have to worry about that. It's only a couple of properties. I'll manage it myself. I'll collect the rent, no problem. I'm going to run this thing bare bones. Fine. Let's say you have no problems, no turnover, no repairs. You manage it yourself. Everything works out. You're going to make about $2,000 a year then, a 2.8% return on your $70,000. Fine. Can you do better than 2.8% on other stuff? I don't know. I would suggest maybe so. But what you said, well, all right, fine. I'm just going to buy the house outright. I've got $250,000 to invest. I don't even want a loan. I just want to own some real estate. I'm going to buy this thing. Fine. Buy it outright. All you have are your taxes, your HOA, and whatever your tenant costs are. With no loan whatsoever, the net profit on this would be about $14,000 a year, which is a 5.6% annual return on your $250,000. Is that a good deal? Is that a bad deal? I don't know. I would suggest there aren't that many people with free cash flow of $250,000 to stick into a house that are looking to do it for a 5.6% return. I would suggest if you had $250 available that you buy a couple of houses with it and maybe try to find one that makes more than 2.8% a year on your leveraged return. You can do it, and people are doing it. And by the way, it's incredibly difficult to find that house for $250, right, Rob? Do you see houses that rent for $1,750 available on the market right now for $250? I don't.
It's tough. Yeah.
I don't.
Yeah,
you're not gonna find it. So even a really low rate of return is not going to be easy to get. But I just want to disabuse people of the notion of, well, I can get it for $50,000 under market value. It's got to be a good rental property. Not necessarily. When things work completely with you, you're talking very low percents of return with no problems at all. Heaven forbid you lose your rent for a couple of weeks due to turnover or one thing breaks. Now you've lost money for the year, which gets back to your point, Rob, of trying to do everything you can to not have turnover. Turnover is what really kills you. 1 month of turnover in this particular property is going to cost you $1,750. It will take you a year to make that back at $125 a month, even if you could raise the rent if the new guy moves in. The best tenant is the tenant you've already got. Just assuming that you can get a new tenant in because you could probably raise the rent $50 to $100 a month is probably not a winning proposition. It's going to cost you even 2 weeks to get that property turned over and get it in condition where you're going to get that extra $100 a month. So what we try to do with our properties is keep those tenants in there as long as we possibly can. Keep them happy. When something breaks, try to fix it. Don't jack up the rent every single year. We do rent increases maybe every 4 or 5 years, usually only when it turns over, actually. But if a tenant's been in there for a really long time and we're now a couple $100 a month behind the market, then you can say, hey, tenant, your lease is coming up this year. I have to renew you at another $100 a month. But by the way, here are all the other listings in the neighborhood. I'm still $100 a month cheaper than everybody else. Yeah. You're still doing great. As needed, take your rental increases, but typically
that's a pro tip. Yeah.
Keep it $50, $100 under the market. You'll be a lot better off. Yeah. So the point I'm trying to make is this is a long game, and it is a game that is difficult to do in an up market like what we're in right now. Your goal needs to be to try to find good cash flowing properties as you can, accumulate them when you can, pay down the loans as quickly as you can, and work to build equity and cash flow over time. It is difficult to just go out and become a real estate millionaire by buying 10 rental houses in 1 year in a market like this that is a very seller-friendly market. You can find them, but you're going to have to do the things that we talked about earlier. You're going to have to prospect. You're going to have to network. You're going to have to market. You're going to have to send out some postcards. You got to send out some letters. You're going to have to kind of really turn over some rocks to uncover the deals today. But that means you just need to be ready when the market changes. It does change. This market is cyclical. It will eventually come down. It always does. That's when you need to be ready. That's what you need to be saving for. So if I were giving advice to someone, I would right now be telling them, right now you should be saving for when the opportunity arises. And you'll know the opportunity is arising when everyone is telling you real estate sucks. Who would want to buy real estate right now? That's when you want to buy real estate. When everybody's like, yeah, the market's pretty good. I'm doing great. It's yet another year of record highs in the real estate market. Probably not when you want to buy, right? What we should have done was borrowed every penny we could and begged, borrowed, and stolen everything we could in late 2008 and 2009 when people were saying, is real estate even going to come back? Do people even really want a house? Is everyone just going to move back in with their parents and just stay there for the next 40 years? That when people are saying those things, that's when you go out and you borrow every dime you can and you buy everything you can buy. It's not easy to do right now. It is incredibly difficult to find deals that make sense right now.
Yeah. Now, you can look at other parts around the country. The issue is the same thing is happening all around the country. We talk to people all around the country.
Yeah.
You know, it's an inventory short market all around the country. Could you find some markets where, like in Nebraska, where they, you know, numbers look better and you could do the 1% rule? Yes. But
or because of the virus, like you said earlier, is there maybe an opportunity now in places like Vegas or Orlando or
correct
one of these markets that's really dependent on leisure travel that are being killed right now, and that may end up even worse in another 4 or 5 months if we have a rebound and things slow down again. There may be some opportunities in the short term in places like that. Just be careful. Make sure that you do your homework, you know your market, you know how you're going to manage it, you know how you're going to keep tenants in and get repairs done and get rent collected and know what the eviction process is in whatever farther out market you're going to invest in. But I can tell you what we like to do are buy properties at closer to the 100x monthly rent price. So that means for our $1,750 a month example, I'd really want to be a buyer of that property for $175,000. Not going to be easy to do, but that's why we market. That's why we network. That's why we prospect. That's why we turn over rocks. No, it's not easy to do. That's why not everyone is a real estate millionaire. But keep coming to these events, right? We'll talk about what we do. We'll talk about
what I was going to say is, and some people call that the 1% rule, and the temptation, and this is the issue, guys. This is if you found a property at $175,000, right, that normally retails for $300,000, and maybe it doesn't require like a ton of work, you know, maybe it just requires $25,000, $30,000. The temptation is to take that money off the table, right? The temptation is to kind of like flip it. But the problem with that is that you're killing your future. Whoops. Hello?
Now I'm here.
I don't know. My screen just went blank. I don't know what happened.
Check your battery.
So now my battery unplugged in. So anyhow, the temptation is to flip it, right? And so you don't want to do that. You want to be patient. You want that asset to, you know, you want to keep that asset. You want to pay it off over time. The number one regret that I hear from real estate investors all the time is that they sold more than what they should have sold. So
yeah, the other beauty of rental property is it almost always has a backstop. Because you have to buy them so low to be good cash flowing property, you probably do have equity in that good rental property, and you could fix and flip it if you had to. Conversely, though, don't make the assumption of, well, I'm going to do this rehab deal, and if it doesn't sell, I'll just rent it out. That rarely works. The prices you have to pay, the money you have to put into your fix and flip deal will rarely make it a good rental. Plus, you've probably spent more money on it and put nicer things in it than you want to have a tenant in it messing up anyway over the next 5 years. That rarely works out. But if you can resist the temptation of selling your good properties when you find them, do try to rent them when you can, and know that if you ever did need to cash out, a good rental property has almost always got equity in it because that tenant's been paying your mortgage down. If you hold on to it for 10 years, you can ride out market cycles, get the advantage of that 4%, 5%, whatever the average appreciation rate is going to be in your market, and that will pay off in the long term. So somebody had a question again about finding prospects for deals. I don't know, what's your number one place to prospect right now for finding a good rental?
Max, let me just make, you could see me, right?
I can see you, but you're
okay,
there.
I
can
have
see
no
you.
idea. Okay, my screen's blank. So number one way is through my network. So I have a large network of developers, investors, right? Attorneys, like bird dogs, just other agents know that we buy real estate. And so what happens is for these distressed assets that come on the market, people just tell me about them. They're like, listen, there's this property, it's 3 months behind. Maybe you can help them. And so that is the number one way. The network is the number one way, right? That's at least been our number one way.
Yep.
You could certainly direct mail for them as well, but that becomes expensive. That's a machine that you got to continuously feed. So unless if you don't have an operations to continuously like a business that's like a machine like that, that's not the best place in the beginning for a lot of people.
Yeah. But if you can spend a couple of bucks on postcards right now,
sure,
because of some of the squirreliness in the market around the virus, there may be some nervous landlords out there, right? If the chatter in our Q&A section is this an okay time? That says to me that there are people out there that are questioning. Good.
Yeah.
That means there may be opportunity out there. There may be a landlord that says, I don't know that I want to keep doing this right now. Try to market to your absentee landlords. See if you can find a landlord somewhere that's looking to get out, or happen to be in a bad spot and his tenant did get laid off. He's not gotten his rent for a few months. He doesn't want to do this anymore. They're looking to get out. You may find an opportunity there. So I would consider doing some absentee landlord marketing right now.
Yeah, but here's where I want to make sure that people understand, right? Because I'm a big marketer. You're not going to send letters one time and expect to get anything. You literally have to do it over and over and over. It's going to take 8, 9, 10 touches before they even recognize what you're asking them, right? You might get lucky. So just know that if you are going to do direct mail, you've got to set aside a budget that you're willing to do for a complete year without a return. And that's hard for a lot of people because people want to typically go wide, right, Mark? They want to send out thousands of postcards, but
Yep.
Really it's going deep, right? Selecting, 100 people, that you're going to hit, 24, 30, 40 times is a lot better than targeting 1,000 people and only hitting them like 2 or 3 times.
Right. Yep. And that get back to marketing, which is a topic we spend a whole night on. What's the message? Where does it go? How often? How do you manage it? So check back and we'll talk about that. And just kind of a teaser for another thing that we may talk about another night. The way the process works for the numbers and cash flow and owning the right property at the right price is really the same for a 4-unit building, a 10-unit building, a 250-unit apartment building. And in fact, the money part of it is oftentimes easier. You can get a commercial loan from a bank if you can just show them good numbers for your potential rental property and say, hey, here's what the current cash flow looks like. I know that there are 4 units vacant out of this 10-unit building. I can put $2,000 in each one of those units. I can raise the rents then from $1,200 to $1,350 a month. That should justify a return on income of X. Show a good story for your rental property, and you might be surprised at how easy it is to get a commercial loan for a big deal. We know guys who have done big deals going straight from 1 or 2 kind of onesie, twosie, single family rentals into multi-unit apartment buildings without too much more stress than it takes you to figure out how to do a buy and hold of a townhouse. So know that the opportunity can be there once you understand how cash flow works to do bigger things with larger properties, and we can talk about that another night.
Yeah. So what I was going to say was, let me give everybody a reference, a great book, Everything You Want to Know About Cash Flow. It's a great book I read early on. So it tells you how to calculate cash flow on commercial properties, residential multifamily properties, individual, like townhomes, single family homes. So everything you need to know about cash flow. Great book to read, right? And the other thing, just to kind of plant in everybody's mind, is that, again, when you buy a multifamily property, you're now really buying, you're buying a business. That is a business, right? And you can affect value of that business by increasing rents, improving the asset, increasing rents, and you can get additional leverage on that. So a lot of value buyers, value investors, right, find a landlord that hasn't done anything to the property in a long, long time.
Yep. And
that asset, by the way, is purely based on the rents that are coming from that property. Unlike residential property, 1 to 4 units, or let's just say, 1 unit, right, is really based more off of market comps. What's the retail market value for somebody that wants to own a home, right? Yep. And so, that's an important distinction, and your operating cost in those multifamily properties can the older the building, the higher they're going to be. They could be as high as 40%, right? So 40%, 35 to 40% could go towards the cost of just running the building. And so you need to do a little bit more homework on it, but it's pretty much the same thing, just like Mark said.
The mechanics are the same. You can find specialists to help you with the things that you need to know about the physical plant, the appraised value, the market factors, how to put the loan package together. You can get a lot of help to do bigger deals. But I think that comes up later. I think we have some buddies that talk to us at these events about how they've bought some big properties and how they've accumulated those assets. So we'll come back to talk about that. But I believe now is the time to cover anything that we didn't talk about, because that's what I got. Let's go back to the Q&A and see if there's anything here we didn't catch.
I think we might have caught the majority of it. Make sure if you have additional questions, now is your time to just ask a question, right? I'm trying to think. There's one question people always ask me. They always ask, where should I buy, right? Like locally in the DMV area, what are some good markets? I'm going to tell you the markets that I like here in Nova. I like Herndon. I like Sterling. I like parts in Manassas, Woodbridge, right? Wherever you can find that, mid-market, working class neighborhood, townhomes, if we're talking about residential property, like, 300,000 and less, that's those numbers make sense, right? When I have somebody coming to me and saying, I have a lot of cash and I want to buy a townhouse, that's in what's that? In Arlington, right? Or, and I'm like, that's not a great cash on cash return, right? But sometimes I find that people have like a lot of money and they just want to park it in a physical asset. Okay, as long as I explain to them, what those numbers look like and they're fine with it, they're just going to park. It essentially just becomes a low-bearing interest account for them, right? And they might be banking on future appreciation, which we don't as cash flow investors. See, that's called being a speculator. We're investors. Investors deal with cash flow, hard numbers today, not what it could be worth tomorrow, right? That's a speculator. That's how people got slaughtered in 2008. There was a lot of new construction where people were speculating on values of new construction. I buy it today for 600, 3 months later it was selling for 650, 675, and people were taking money off the table that way left and right until it stopped. Right. And then people lost their shirt, right? And they lost their shirt because they were speculating. So don't be a speculator, be an investor.
Leverage is good, but leverage is also dangerous.
Yeah.
Over
Sure.
leverage. A couple of real good questions. Where do you find good property managers, and what questions should you be asking your property manager?
Yeah, I would, believe it or not, Google's your friend, right? You could say property managers near me. You could look at the reviews that are on there. By the way, the ones that have the reviews that are on there are operating like what I would call a professional business. They're smart about their marketing. So read those reviews. There's also association specifically. I forget the name of the association. National Association of Property Managers, NAPM, I think it is, NAPM. That is another place where you can go. But also this network, right? Asking people within the network in our Facebook DMV Facebook group, you could just ask, hey, who's got a referral for a great property manager? And people will let you know. I really believe that the power is in the relationships all around you. So nothing beats a great referral, right? Yep. From a trusted source.
Yeah. So I was going to say, here is where you're going to find a good property manager, right? Ask the people in this group, which I should probably try to pull up our Facebook page so people can see what it looks like, to join Grid Investor DMV, right?
That's right.
Well, I can mess around with that. We're on Facebook, Grid Investor DMV, or if you saw Rob's Facebook post, look him up on Facebook, and you can post some links to our closed group. You ask to get in, we will let you in. We will only remove you if you get spammy and start doing bad stuff. But that is a great place. We have hundreds of people in there, growing by more every month. It is a great place for resources just like that. And I don't know, Rob, do you want to make any kind of plug? Don't you know anybody in property management, or about to be, or wants to be?
Yeah, I mean, we years ago, we ran a property management business and we sold it. And we are starting another property management business. It is Home Pro Property Management. We just set up everything, all in corporation papers and all the rest. Thomas Price, our director of operations, will be the CEO of that business. I'm excited for him. He's been building all of our back-end operations in our agency and investment business for the last 7 years. And this is his opportunity to lead his own business. And we're partners with him in that endeavor. So, but we'll have information coming soon with that. That'll be Home Pro Property Management. Excited about that for sure. Thanks. So thanks for that, Mark.
Yep. Okay, but use this resource. That's what this network is for. So ask people for recommendations. I will put my name or my email in the chat box. So check us out there. Drop us an email anytime. Grab coffee. I think the coffee shops are open again. Grab coffee. We can tell you what we know, who we like for property management and questions. But back to the questions you would ask. How many properties are you managing? How many people do you have that manage those properties? How do you manage tenants, evictions, rent collection? What is your collection rate? Do you have any kind of guaranteed income programs? Many property managers now will say, we will guarantee your rent, landlord. We'll find you good tenants. We will guarantee you X dollars per month or X percent of that rent, and we'll take care of anything else. We'll take the risk. If the tenant needs to be collected on, we'll take care of that for you. Yes, it costs you a little bit more money, but you have certainty, which is a very nice thing. So that is worth asking. Take us out for coffee. We can tell you everything else we know about great property managers. Another question is one type of property, so condo, townhouse, single family, better than another. If I had to choose one thing to own, I like townhouses as opposed to a single family house. A townhouse, in most cases, is literally held up on one side or the other by another piece of property. So that's one less wall I have to maintain. Fewer kind of outside things to have to keep an eye on. They typically are in areas that are those great rental, middle income markets. The numbers almost always are better, and the costs are kind of that good combination. A single family house can be great because sometimes you can get a single family house not in an association. So now you're saving on those association fees. The opposite end of that spectrum is the condo. We do have a condo rental that works fine. The condo fee has been very stable, but that was part of our research before buying it, was to look at the budgets, that big thick stuff that you get, that you have 72 hours to review and change your mind on when you buy a property. At least dig through that portion of it to find the property management bit, find out who is managing that HOA, that association, what their budget is like, how often they raise their HOA dues and why, and if they've ever had special assessments, if they've ever had to assess themselves for a new roof, a new parking lot. You're looking for signs of not good management, because if they weren't managed well before, they probably aren't going to be managed well now. And if it's got an elevator that's costing $40,000 a year, that never gets better. If it's got a pool that's costing $50,000 a year to maintain, that never gets better. That's what you want to watch out for. And those are the things that can kill you in condo buildings, because you have no control over that fee. And if something goes wrong, everybody's got to pitch in, and that can make it immediately difficult for you to go sell later if you happen to be the owner when the elevator breaks. And now it's a $150,000 assessment, and we can't pay for it. So now we've got to take a loan, and everybody in the neighborhood's got to pitch into this loan for the next 10 years. That can drastically devalue your property. Another thing to watch out for with condos is sometimes they can change the rules on how rentable they are. Condos do have the ability to change their rental possibility and take away your legal ability to rent, right?
If you look at the Savoy and in Market Street, it's like no investors.
Correct.
Right? They're like owner occupants only.
And they can do that. If their documents allow it, that is a thing that they can do. So there are definitely more things you need to watch out for anytime an association is involved. And you will always have that in a condo. You will just about always have that in a townhouse. And I can tell you that fees for condos are always higher than a townhouse. Yes, they are maintaining more things for you, but there are also more things to maintain. And so you have people who are not professionals oftentimes in charge of the budgets and in charge of the maintenance. And that can go wrong on you. So be very careful with condos. My personal preference is townhouse. Single families are great, slightly higher maintenance sometimes just because there's more physical things to maintain. But those also can work.
Yeah. So Mark, I'll unless other people have additional questions, but we can almost end it here. And I want to give people things to think about. Now we're speaking the way what we're describing is what we do here in this market, right? But what I find is when I talk to landlords across like all other markets, so let's just go to DC as an example. There are some landlords that really like single family houses that are large, if possible, because you can ask for, if you understand how to work with the city, you can actually get premium rent on those properties if there's lots of a large bedroom count with Section 8, right? So there are these like little pockets where people have found the ability to take some of these assets and extract as much value as possible, right?
Sure.
So there was a landlord that I met in Herndon, and his strategy, and I was like, of course, yeah, like this, totally makes sense. Now, it's not fully compliant with the town of Herndon or the county, but people do it all the time. He would buy, a single family house, and he would build a kitchenette in the basement, and he would literally create a duplex, right? And so now he was getting premium rent. He was renting the upstairs, right, for, and to one family, and the downstairs to another family, right? And so, there are some things that you got to be worried about. That's not 100% kosher, right? but he was extracting as much value and money as possible from that asset. Then people do other things like renting garages, right? Renting parking spots. So remember, you start looking at your real estate as it's this asset that you control, and you have the ability to create additional income streams from that asset. Especially if you look at the asset a little differently. So some people have Airbnb. What's that?
Group homes.
Group homes. Group homes. Right there, you go.
Managed care.
Managed care. There's another one, right? Managed care is a big one in DC. They're taking these, managed care single-family homes and converting them legally into managed care homes, right? In fact, my wife here recently, she was telling me a story about she visited one of these where it was a house, it was a home. It felt like a home. There was 4 tenants in it. There's care there for the elderly. And what made it so nice compared to, an assisted living facility is that it felt like a home, right? And, we have a friend of ours, he runs our Grid Baltimore, Rafael Castagnol, and this is something that he's either doing now or exploring, right?
Yep.
And so there's a lot of different ways, right, to really create wealth by buying and holding assets. We've given you kind of like surface level info today, right? But when you start going deeper, there's a lot of different ways to be able to do it.
Plug for the rest of the network. We are a big network. We're having these events with partners of ours who kind of do things the way we do and believe in the things we believe in other parts of the area. Find those on Meetup. If you look up Grid Investor on Meetup, you will find those other locations. If you go to gridinvestor.com, you will be able to sign up and attend those in Falls Church, in Gainesville, in Baltimore, in Upper Marlboro, and coming soon to the West Coast.
And what's so interesting is that each one of those networks, because they're in a different market, and Arlington is a different market than Reston.
Yep.
That there are certain things that they do there more than what we do here. Like they might be doing more development work because that's what's happening in that market. You don't see a lot of that happening where we are in our immediate area, right? Or Baltimore, Rafael owns hundreds of units in Baltimore, that he lived here in Vienna. He literally, I sold his single family home here in Vienna. He moved to Baltimore, and he buys large apartment buildings in Baltimore and does, this assisted living facilities. And so if you have an interest in that, I encourage you to just join the Baltimore meetup and listen to what they're doing, because they'll have a little bit of a different spin because their area is different.
Yep.
So that's what's powerful about this.
Which then brings us back around to where you find us. You'll find us gridinvestor.com. You'll find us on Meetup. We're hopefully signed up for this event tonight. Please do the same for next month's event. May even be live back at our HQ in Reston. We hope to see you all.
That'd be awesome. I want to do this live again.
Vishal was asking where he can find replays of these past events. It should be on gridinvestor.com. If not now, coming very soon. Please
coming
check
soon.
back.
Yeah, we will make sure that we have this out for everybody.
Yep.
I'll make sure that Jess posts this, because I noticed that if we went live and then for some reason I was checking, we're not live right now. So something went wrong. Maybe when I hit the record button as well, it cut the live stream. I don't know if for whatever reason. So we'll make sure that we put this back out on our social channels as well. So thanks for tuning in, guys. We appreciate you.
Yep. And hopefully we will see you at the next one.
Yep. And Becca, because I can't see my screen, you're gonna have to shut us down, baby.
I'll take us out. But thanks everybody, and we will hopefully see you here, same time, same place next month.
Now I see my screen again.
Yay! Wave goodbye, Rob.
See you guys. Take care. Bye bye.
Bye bye.